Welcome to another episode of This Is Why I Don't Vote, a podcast. Season 5, Episode 43. Your safe space to discuss sports, politics, social issues, and even religion, where we will take it all very seriously, but not too seriously. Haven't done one of these episodes in a while, a movie breakdown. Paul Thomas Anderson's One Battle After Another. My buddy Jason and I will discuss our impressions of the movie. And yes, we dive right into it, so it's a pure spoiler alert. If you haven't seen the movie and you want to, you may want to refrain from listening to this episode because we're going to spoil it all. Thank you to all of my longtime listeners. I really appreciate you. If you're new to the podcast, please like, subscribe, thumbs up, 5-star, write a review, send to friends and enemies far and wide. This Is Why I Don't Vote podcast is on Patreon. Please consider supporting.
Act 1, a movie review of Paul Thomas Anderson's One Battle After Another.
A bit of a change on This Is Why I Don't Vote podcast. Rather than two idiots discuss sports, back to something that I know many of the listeners out there love by way of the numbers. These are usually some of my most popular podcast episodes. A movie review, a breakdown, if you will, of the latest film from Paul Thomas Anderson, One Battle After Another. Here to break down the movie with me is my buddy Jason, who has appeared on several episodes of Two Idiot Discuss Sports, but is now appearing in Two Geniuses Break Down Movies. Jason, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, sir. Thanks for having me again.
I don't know if we could credibly refer to ourselves as geniuses, but I don't mind doing that for the sake of comedy and because I know that given both of our affinity for this director, neither one of us came into this podcast episode half-assed. I have notes. I'm sure you have notes. This was something that you and I had talked about when the announcement was made that this movie was in production and that it was going to be released. You went out and I believe saw it twice. Correct me if I'm wrong. What did you think about the latest offering from Paul Thomas Anderson, One Battle After Another?
All right, so first of all, I had intended to go the second time, did not. So this is going to be a hair fresher in your mind, but you are correct. I have my notes. I may have over-prepared a little bit. I think my initial impressions are kind of as follows. First of all, I had a really great time at the movies. This movie was fun. It was good. It was entertaining. And I think despite some of the weighty subject matter, this is Paul Thomas Anderson's first popcorn film. I think this was designed to be an entertainment vehicle, and it succeeds on that level to a major degree, to where I was a little surprised and maybe has some misgivings that we'll talk about. I think number 2, this is PTA's first action movie, and he nailed it full stop. Starting with the opening sequence and going to kind of the last 2/3 of the movie that are just so propulsive. And then I guess the once I stepped away from it, having had such a good time at the theater, I mean, I hadn't been to the movies since Sinners, so it had been 4 or 5 months. I think what I would say is that when I started to think about it a little bit, the satire bit, I think there is a fine line between satire and farce, and he may have crossed it. I thought it was a little heavy-handed, but to summarize, really liked it and had a really good time at the movies.
Wow, your review is practically the inverse of my review. And what I mean by that,
be fun.
I did not have fun. I did not think. I thought the movie was extremely uneven, and yet there were parts of the movie that I thought were so powerful and were so different from the things that Anderson had done in the past that I quite enjoyed them. So when I say inverse, yeah, I think that there were parts of the movie that were popcorn, and I did not like it. I didn't think that and we can get into it, but I'm just going to leave it at that for now. I did not enjoy it. The action, the way that he framed that movie and shot it reminded me of No Country for Old Men. The action was so intense and believable and authentic that really drew me into the film. So regardless of whether or not you like the movie, the cinematography is amazing. The way that the action is portrayed on the big screen is amazing. It's worth seeing the film in the theater for that aspect alone, that I don't think it would translate. I don't care how nice you say your home theater system is, unless it's an actual movie theater, you're not going to get the same force and effect. It is pure, unadulterated, to your third point, farce. And I was really disappointed in PTA in that respect, because I thought that he could have done more with the satire element, and it seemed lazy to me, Jason. It seemed lazy to me the way that he approached this film. And maybe that's where we need to kick this off. The name of the protagonist. Okay, I buy. It's not the greatest, Pat Smoke, whatever it is. But the name of the antagonist, Steve Lockjaw. The name, I don't even know what you could call the character. Let's just say she's the female lead, because her character to me is completely underwritten and underused. Perfidia Beverly Hills. You've got members of this French 75 revolutionary group that Thunder Pussy, or Jungle Pussy rather. Am I remembering this correctly? It's either Thunder Pussy or Jungle Pussy.
No, you got it. That's the porn valley coming out in PTA.
Agreed. But it doesn't hold weight for me when going through the movie. And I'm I can't be done now. What is this? The Christmas group? The Christmas Adventurers Club? Are you fucking kidding me? Club. That these names are used in the context that they are in the film, to me, constantly kept kicking me out of the reality that Anderson was trying to create. And I was just like, this is stupid. It's farcical. Let me give you an example. The interrogation scenes. Oh my God. Okay. Vintage PTA. I don't know if that actor is an actual interrogator and what he does translated so well to the screen, or he's an actor that studied with an interrogator and was able to convey what goes on in an interrogation room. I was completely locked in. He was amazing. Those scenes had such weight and gravity, and yet using these names casually in the conversation in those interrogations was so stupid to me. I thought it would have been smarter. And I want to take a step back very quickly. This movie was based off of a book by Thomas Pynchon called Vineland. Paul Thomas Anderson wrote the script. So this is a screen adaptation of a book. He's completely responsible for all of this. He wrote that script. So he is the director of the movie. He's one of the producers on the movie, but he is the screenwriter of this movie. So this was a conscious choice to use these names. If you had gone into that interrogation, if you'd gone into any of the law enforcement elements of this movie and said, Perfidia Beverly Hills, also known as, and then had a regular or a common name, I would have been like, okay, this is clearly her revolutionary name, but it's not her given name. Thunder Pussy or Jungle Pussy, to use that in casual, like, do you know Thunder Pussy? Do you know Jungle Pussy of the French? And I'm supposed to sit there and be like, what? If this woman had a given name at birth, any law enforcement agent would say, do you know Jane Smith, also known as Jungle Pussy of the French 75? That would have lent to these scenes the weight and gravity that I think that he was going for. But it was so absurd, Jason. Tell me that I'm wrong. Tell me that you didn't, at one point in the movie, just say, this is kind of stupid.
Well, so I won't say that I said it was kind of stupid. What I will say is that I winced. I winced when Lockjaw was. So we're now 15 years later from the first 35 minutes of the movie, which is kind of the Perfidia French 75 doing their thing. before she makes some questionable decisions. So when we get to that, we're like 15 years ahead of time when they're doing some of the interviews, I guess. The names thing, it didn't bother me because that's kind of a PTA thing. You've got, for example, the main character of Phantom Thread is called Reynolds Woodcock. Now, that's a very staid and traditional and period piece movie. So he doesn't go into it a bunch. He just throws that in there because it's funny. In this case, they're really brought to the forefront because, these characters, Jungle Pussy, Perfidia, are not only on the screen a lot in the first 40 minutes, but they're very verbal and very attention-getting.
Yes, they are primary characters in the narrative that he's weaving within the first hour of the movie.
Well, and one of the things we may get to at some point is I'm not even sure how much Perfidia is a true believer. She seems like an action junkie to me. And at some point... No, I don't want to jump ahead. No, I didn't feel like it was stupid. But like I said in my initial impressions, there's definitely a line between satire and farce, and he jumped all over it.
Okay, I appreciate that you noticed it, that it didn't have the same effect on you. Obviously, anybody who watched the movie is going to have a unique impression of it because we're all unique people. It didn't work for me.
Pat, I did. I winced. Specifically when they brought Lockjaw in to kind of say to him, we'd like to invite you into this club, and here's what you're going to have to go through. So I winced because I was sensing it at the time. But, I mean, this is an anti-fascist movie. And I think people that are maybe more left-leaning than I am think that this is how it is.
Okay, I want to talk about that, and I think that also plays into the way we're going to use Perfidia Beverly Hills as the example, but I think you can do this for a lot of the characters. So you say this is an anti-fascist movie. I went into the theater expecting as much. One of the reasons why I was so disappointed in this movie and why I thought it was so uneven is that, let's take, for example, Inherent Vice, another Pynchon film that Paul Thomas Anderson adapts for the movie screen, and I think he sticks more to the actual story of that book than he did. Well, hold on. I know he did. He followed more the book than he did here, this adaptation from Vineland into One Battle After Another.
That's correct. Vineland this is a loose adaptation. Other than making Sortilege kind of the omniscient narrator of Inherent Vice, it's pretty close.
Right. Okay. So we have this context, and we're using Pynchon as basically the foundation. And what he does so brilliantly is he introduces you to a character almost in the mix of whatever that character is going through that's going to be the prime mover of that character for the rest of the book. So you're almost thrown into action without the proper context. And what you have to do is keep reading, and you get all of these other storytelling vehicles that allow you to understand who this person is, what their motivations are, why they have these motivations. I think in this movie, One Battle After Another, Anderson completely fails in that regard. So you don't have all of the proper context to understand who these characters are, what their motivations are, and why do they have these motivations. So when you see some of the actions that are taken by the characters, in my mind, if you're making a true anti-fascist film, it trivializes, and I don't know that this is what he wanted, but this is how it came across to me. It trivializes this revolutionary mentality, because every one of the characters is either selfish or is completely self-interested in a way that has nothing to do with the sacrifice of a revolutionary movement. Let's use Perfidia. Perfidia seems to have this not only action addiction, but it's mixed in with this sexual or sexualized addiction as well, where it's action and sex, but it's ultimately about power. And it's about this fleeting grasp for power in these moments. And when it comes down to reality, she is completely incapable of coping with it. And yet, the background that we're given about her, which is extremely short and too short in my mind, you remember the part where DiCaprio is sitting there at the table with what you believe to be her family, but they're all female. It's all a bunch of women, and the older woman is basically lambasting DiCaprio. You're not a real revolutionary. You're never going to be able to keep up with this girl. She's a Rolling Stone. And that's all you kind of get.
You're not right for my daughter.
You're not right for my daughter. That's the only context. You're like, oh, wait a minute. Okay, so this is her mother. There's no males in the room. And yet, that revolutionary zeal isn't really present in her character at all. And then she goes and basically sells everybody out to the benefit of herself. And there's all this resentment within the movement, but it seems like everybody has a fleeting grasp of the movement. Another scene, I'm just going to throw this out and then I want to let you talk, but Jungle Pussy, walking along the wall that separates each one of the bank tellers when they're in the bank.
It's like the teller bank.
Okay. She's providing to whoever will listen her revolutionary manifesto. Why are they doing this? This money is going to pay for the weapons that I'm going to use, blah, 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 blah. And then she sees Perfidia shoot the security guard. And the look on her face, that drop, I thought it was brilliantly shot and brilliantly acted. And yet I don't think that Anderson does anything with this. It's to me, it's very haphazard the way he depicts this revolutionary group. And to me, it trivialized, and maybe this is what he was going for. He wants the whole thing to be satire. He wants the whole fascist type dictatorial control over society by whatever group, and then the movements that are counter to it, that whole yin and yang to be trivialized and to make it somewhat of a joke, because I never felt like this group was serious, right? You have a guy who's tepid in his revolutionary zeal, given the fact that when the group breaks up, he just becomes a drug addict. Even in his attempt to save his daughter, he's still doing drugs. Am I making myself clear as to how I could walk away from this movie and be like, what the fuck was he even trying to say between fascism and anti-fascism?
I think abundantly. So there's a lot to chew on there. What I want to say first, and this is something that I was trying to conceptualize, because I clearly don't have as strong negative feelings about the movie as you did. But what I would say, and the way I phrased this to myself, was this is what I believe to be a good movie where Paul Thomas Anderson, the writer, failed Paul Thomas Anderson, the director.
I love it.
PTA, the director, fucking nailed this movie.
Agreed.
PTA, the writer, it's almost like he had too many ideas and he couldn't land on one. So that's kind of my first response. The thing about there's no context to Perfidia, this is true. The first time we see Perfidia, she's like on an overpass looking down into that detainment camp. And I don't think we needed background or context for that, because that first 20 minutes, other than the boner joke with Lockjaw, was pretty powerful. The fact that Perfidia is gone after she has, and I want to talk about the ending, by the way. The fact that Perfidia is gone after she's sold out her friends, and Mae West, the Alana Haim character, gets murdered. Laredo, played by, what's his name? His last name's Wood. He was Avon
yeah, I can't remember his name either, but yeah, I've noticed.
So she gets like people in her cohort murdered or detained.
Correct.
So then we get to the point where they're with Bob and Charlene, the baby, before they changed their names, or Pat and Charlene rather. And they're with the family, and the family's like, you're not good enough for my daughter, or you're not right for my daughter. But the thing that I find about Perfidia and kind of the group is they have this, I think, revolutionary thing, but it's all this bullshit. Like, before Perfidia goes to the particular rally or the bank robbery where Jungle Pussy has her monologue, and then Perfidia, I don't think for any good reason, shoots the security guard.
Correct.
And that leads
them off. I agree. No good reason.
Them off on that brilliant chase.
Yes.
Before that happens, she's having some postpartum issues or whatever, but she's jealous of the baby because Bob's taking care of the baby. She hates Bob because Bob wants to settle down, and she's using this revolutionary rhetoric that doesn't even sound right coming out of her words. It sounds like she doesn't believe it.
I agree with all of this. That's one of the reasons why I had such a problem with the movie. And I think you nailed it, that the director, Paul Thomas Anderson, was not given the best script by writer Paul Thomas Anderson. And I think he tried to land on too many things in the same movie, and he didn't land on any of them. You know, one of the other unexplored aspects of this movie was the female-dominated or the female-centric revolutionary group. Because if you fast forward to the church, which becomes a crucial element in this story, it's all females in there from this post-revolutionary French 75 after Perfidia betrays them. Yes, there are men in the revolutionary group prior to them being broken up, but it seems like a lot of the prime movers are women, and I thought maybe he was going to do something with that. I thought that maybe one of two things. One, he could have said, look, the women are the prime movers because they need this full commitment from the men, and many of them aren't fully committed. They use their sexual prowess to then induce, is probably the best word, or maybe seduce these men into taking all of these risks. Or the second thing could be, and you could have a more cultural or a more social commentary about the difference between men and women, and that when that oppression from that fascist movement lands, it lands first on women, then on men, right? So the stronger resistance is going to be initially from women who are independent, and then they'll motivate the men. It just wasn't there. And I'm not even saying I agree with any of that. I wanted there to be some foundation to the rationale of having a house full of women saying, you're not good enough for our daughter, a convent, for lack of a better word, even though it wasn't that, full of ex-revolutionaries that are wearing habits that claim to be nuns that are growing marijuana. I mean, it just, the whole thing seemed so slapstick. And it just didn't work for me. But I think you're right about, you know, the script failed PTA, the director, because PTA, the director, killed it. And, you know, he did what he could do with some of those scenes with respect to the violence, with respect to, again, the intensity of those interrogations. I wanted to ask you a couple of things. You mentioned the ending. One of the things that I've always respected about PTA is I felt like the story had a cohesion where he knew where he was going, the characters didn't know where they were going, and you as the viewer didn't know where you were going. Things didn't happen in the movie in order to simply progress the plot of the movie. That's one of the things that I talked to you about this privately, I hate about Hollywood, is that you have so many of these hack writers and hack directors where you have to have what they call now the MacGuffin. You have to have some sort of device in the movie that somebody has to go out and find, or something that somebody has to go out and do in order just to propel the movie forward so you can get to the scenes that you want and then wrap it all up. I felt like this was the first time I'd watched a PTA movie where they had MacGuffins, where the MacGuffin was, I don't know the code, and you had what I felt like was way too much movie dedicated to Bob trying to elicit this meeting place, didn't know the code, all these different theoretical or metaphorical things that they had to memorize as revolutionary members. And it just didn't work for me. I felt like if you had that much time to dwell on things like that, you could have put in some of the backstory of these characters that would have made us more attached to them as people, and therefore might have been, as a viewer, more compelled to root for or root against one of them. What are your thoughts?
I want to fight for this movie a little bit because I do like it. And it'll probably be, I know you're not a list guy, but somewhere between 4 and 7 for me when I think about it. And so that's something for me to do. Where the movie takes off for me is when we get 15 years into the future, and I can't remember the character's name, but the guy who essentially gives Ghetto Pat the transponders and the new identifications for he and Willa, and he sends them off to Bacton Cross. And then we get 15 years later, and he is found out by Lockjaw's private investigator / tracker, because he also happens to be a Native American.
Yes.
And that's what gets the action to Bacton Cross. When we get, and again, this is me going to bat for the movie. When we get to Bob escaping Lockjaw and his paramilitary unit through that tunnel, and then we get to the dance where, what's her name? Where Deandra, who was part of the group apparently, comes and finds Willa in the bathroom.
Right.
And they do the quote. Now, first of all, I think that Leo's phone acting in this, both on the payphone and then when his phone is finally charged in Sensei's apartment, is fucking hilarious. I laughed at it out loud. But then you're talking about the kind of the codes, where Deandra comes in and says, Green Acres, Beverly Hillbillies, Hooterville Junction. Willa says, will no longer be so goddamn relevant. Deandra says, and women will not care if Dick finally got down with Jane on Search for Tomorrow. Willa says, because black people will be in the street. Deandra says, looking for a brighter day. And they say together, the revolution will not be televised. Hairs on the back of my arms stood up when this happened. So I think some of that bullshit that you didn't like really spoke to me. Now, the Pat finally getting somebody, or Bob finally getting somebody to talk to him, and the guy that gets on the phone and says, hey, listen, I'm going to ask you one question. It's not about the code. And he says something to the effect of, what's my favorite kind of pussy? And he says, Mexican hairless. And he says, this is Bob. This is a revolutionary. Tell him where he needs to go and apologize like you mean it. See, little stuff like that is PTA stuff that I really enjoyed.
Well, I'm not disagreeing with you. In fact, I actually laughed out loud during the Bob phone scenes where he was so frustrated. I thought, the acting in this movie was impeccable. I'm not questioning the actors, and I'm not questioning some of the dialogue. In fact, I also like the dialogue when the revolution will not be televised. What I was reflecting on, even while the movie was going on, this is taking a lot of bandwidth out of this movie to get from point A to point B. And it doesn't have that kind of cohesion that I would expect out of a Paul Thomas Anderson movie. You have the scene where the tracker is telling Lockjaw, I'm not taking this girl to go kill her. I won't do it. And he says, do you know the Spirit of 1776 or whatever they're called, that group? And he's like, yeah. And he's like, okay, I'll pay you the same fee to take her to them. And he says, okay. And he immediately starts driving off. And I'm thinking to myself, well, he has to know if he won't kill her, they're going to kill her. So he's taking her to her death either way. And yet he does it. It just didn't make sense to me.
Hold on. It's the pussy way out, right? I know that's probably too strong a language for your pod. It's the pussy way out. But then he realizes it. And he goes and shoots all those guys.
Well, I appreciate that. I still have a hard time believing that he doesn't know who he's dealing with, given that they're being portrayed as this master race white supremacist group that's taken over the government, or that is part of this deep state element of the government. And this is what I'm saying about this thing has to happen to propel the movie to the next thing. He has to take her all the way there. Then he has to have the crisis of conscience. Then he has to shoot everybody so that she could get into the car, and the guy who's been assigned by the Christmas Adventurers Club to kill both Willa and Lockjaw gets them into cars on remote areas of the highway. The scenes themselves were brilliant, but the story to me and how it all worked out is one of those things where you had to have this happen, then to have this happen, then to have this happen, so I can have this scene. And it didn't mesh for me. That's why I thought the movie was so uneven.
So hold on. Listen, I'm going to fight for this movie, but what I will say, and I agree in large part with some of your points, and my whole thing about writer PTA versus director PTA. The movie is messy. It's messy in its construction, except that it's great within its set pieces.
Yeah, that's a good point.
It's one of the 5 best car chases I've ever seen.
Yeah,
I wrote down the list. We've got To Live and Die in L.A., freaking movie. Remember that?
Oh, that the car chase scene and that was done in what, 84, 85?
It may have been earlier. You get Bullet in the late 60s.
Yep.
You get French Connection in the early 70s. That's great. Where he's chasing the L,
yes,
the subway.
Yes, in his car. Yeah.
And then just a personal favorite of mine, the end of Death Proof, where it's the chase scene where the girls end up killing Kurt Russell. Spoiler alert.
Well, this whole thing I'm going to have in the intro. I didn't even say spoiler alert before we started into this, so I will have to say that before the dialogue even starts.
That was good, though.
Yes. I would throw in there The Matrix 2. That's quite a chase scene. I think it was, at least in its construction, pretty revolutionary in having so much violence with so many cars and people on top of vehicles going from vehicle to vehicle. But I can't argue with you.
Hold on. As you may know, The Ringer and Bill Simmons, those people like themselves some lists. And I consulted The Ringer today, and sure enough, I found a top 20 car chases of all time list, and that Matrix movie is on it.
That doesn't surprise me. But you're not wrong. I think that's a great way to look at this movie from a glass half full perspective, is that it's messy. I'm going to use my word. It's uneven. It's often I don't want to say incoherent. That's not the right word, but it's not cohesive. And yet in each set piece, the acting is brilliant. The cinematography is brilliant. It's almost like these little vignettes of filmmaking. What's the word I'm looking for? Filmmaking etiquette is the word that keeps coming, but etiquette's not the right word.
The craft. The
craft, right. The craft of filmmaking. And yet this director was working with material that he had a very difficult time tying together to create one cohesive story.
Yeah, I think that's right. I clearly had more fun than you did. I don't know if you want to talk about the ending. I kind of do. But before we get to the ending, I would like to bring up one Benicio del Toro as Sensei Sergei St. Carlos, which is my favorite character in the movie by a lot.
I'd love to talk about him. I thought that this was one of the more interesting characters because this is what I would have expected out of each one of the characters in the movie. That you learn a lot about that character, not in any flashback or not in any straightforward exposition or dialogue, but in the context of the movie with what's going on, you learn a ton about that character. I was hoping to get that out of every one of the characters, but it seems like the fully fleshed out one is Benicio del Toro's character. And by the way, he does a great job in portraying Sergio St. Carlos, right?
Yes. So this I think the reason that we might both like this character is that if you listen to PTA on the awards circuit, not on the awards circuit, on the marketing campaign, and I think Leo too, they both kind of intimate or downright say that when Benicio landed, he had an idea for the character that was kind of outside the script. And one of the things he says, Sensei, I've got a little Latino Harriet Tubman situation going on at my place. All legit, from the heart, no cash. And in the half hour of the movie that he's in, he saves Bob twice, but he also has these people that come to him for safety and movement and all of those things. And I just thought it was a brilliant character. He's for sure going to be nominated. And I just wanted to cite that because it made me happy. Also, just a few small beers. It's okay.
I love that. Now, I didn't like the fact that in getting into the car, he brought alcohol for Bob. And then I had to kind of reflect on, I was sitting there because I was questioning the motives of each character in the movie. But that was where it was like, he knows that Bob is a drug addict and that Bob is not going to operate at his highest level.
Hold on. You said this twice. Bob's a pot smoker and he drinks too much.
Okay. Yeah, he doesn't shoot heroin.
This is not a heroin fentanyl situation. I mean, I think you're right. He's an addict, and he cops to that when Will calls him out in their very first scene together. But when you say drug addict, I go, Christopher shooting smack in between his toes in Sopranos. Maybe that's a more complication for me.
Well, no, I think I'm well within my bounds to call him a drug addict because, and yes, I know that the marijuana now is legal, but when you hit it 4 or 5 times during a 2 to 3 minute conversation with your daughter's teacher when you're going to the parent-teacher conference, you might have a problem. By the way,
that was a lot. That
was a brilliant scene, though. It was one of my favorite scenes of this character crying because he wants his daughter to assimilate into society, and yet he totally doesn't want his daughter to assimilate into this society. I thought that was one of the more clever twists of the movie. But getting back to...
He doesn't let her have a cell phone, and then is surprised when Sensei has her cell phone number because she's a teenage girl, and of course she has a cell phone.
Yes. He is trying to live in this world where he can convey his paranoia, which is legitimate in the world of the movie, to his daughter, and not realizing that he's dealing with a teenage girl. There is something there that I think, and we'll talk about that at the end of the movie as well. I'm going to stop on that topic because I do want to talk about the end of the movie. But go back to Benicio del Toro with the beers and then having the small beers, almost like he was sacrificing himself for Bob so that Bob could continue on in his quest to find his daughter.
It's 100% what he did. He actually says, I just saved one of the greatest revolutionaries of our time twice in the same day.
Right,
Sorry,
and that
I didn't mean to get. I got fired up. I apologize.
no, because I think that that's part of what I love about PTA is that you learn something about the characters, that he knew who Bob was. He is not Bob. He is running in plain sight a Latino underground railroad. Well, you can't be a revolutionary and run an underground railroad. You're going to call attention to yourself. The whole thing is, I have to have a legitimate business. I have to have a legitimate community presence so that this will work. And yet he recognized that he was dealing with someone who he thought was a kindred spirit and approached it from a different aspect, right?
Well, he's doing community building as opposed to whatever the French 75 was doing. It's grassroots versus, again, and the French 75 don't really have any stated doctrine that we're aware of.
Which is another problem that I have with the movie, is that if you're going to have this revolutionary group, and this comes from the book, right? One of the excerpts I saw about Vineland was it started in the 60s in the world of the book, and that you were introduced to the characters in 1984 after Reagan was elected for the second time. The revolutionaries started in the 60s after the election of Nixon and the fascist nation that Nixon was setting up. And here you now have them 20 years later having to deal with what they're seeing as the reestablishment of that fascist nation, yet they're all in hiding and they're all on the run. That to me is such a brilliant idea versus what Anderson did in the script, but that's neither here nor there. Based on the time that we have, we're already over 40 minutes. You and I tend to do that. Let's talk about the end of the movie. Let's talk about, well, first of all, I want to ask you this question. Were you surprised when you saw Lockjaw walking down the street having been shot in the face that he went back into the world that he so wanted to be accepted by, and in a passive way, not an aggressive way?
No, I'm not surprised at all. He says to Willa, when he's giving her the DNA test, I have a higher calling. As much of a cartoon as he is, and I think Penn's great in this, he truly believes that. He says to her, I have a higher calling. And that's before she says, well, why is your T-shirt so tight?
Right. That was funny. That was a funny moment.
So I think he believes that.
So in your mind, in the universe of the film, he has the higher calling. This, what we'll call, shadow group, is that higher calling. And he couldn't either A, fathom that they would betray him, or in realizing that they did betray him, he realized, I need to now come up with a solution for the problem that is that I may have sired a half black, half white baby. So this is again talking about maybe how sloppiness. I think it's possible that Lockjaw believes Willa is dead. Oh, that's true. If he gets shot, he's run off the road. This guy that shoots him tears off into the distance. Bob disappears, Willa disappears, and
he's in the clear.
Yeah. And they lose their tracker. The Christmas Adventurer Club loses their tracker. Yeah, maybe he's off the radar, she's off the radar, and he thinks I can go in there and make up any story that I want.
With his face all fucked up, by the way.
Right. All right, so let's...
By the way, real quick, the guy that shoots Lockjaw, Tony Goldwyn. He was the bad guy in Ghost.
Oh my God, you're right. Look.
That's 30 years ago. He looks great.
Not only does he look great, I'm wondering why, because he was great in that movie. He was great in this movie. I have to go to IMDb after this and look at what he's been doing. So he's...
Ending, sorry.
Oh, yeah. Let's go to the ending. So you said that you had something... I feel like it's a big reveal. What is your angle on the ending?
So my issue with the ending is twofold. And again, I want to restate for your listening public that I like this movie. But the ending was tough for me. Number one, we get the letter from Perfidia to Willa, where Bob, who's now I think just vaping nicotine at this point. I don't think he's super high. Gives her the letter, and she goes away and reads the letter. And it's nice. But my initial thought walking out of the theater was, this is a soft ending. I wanted to say happy ending. That's a charged phrase. It's a soft ending. And I didn't love it. And then after listening or thinking about it a little bit more, it became a little more problematic for me. Because I think, and I could be wrong, but I think Paul Thomas Anderson wants us to forgive or even like Perfidia.
Oh, I
don't.
I love where you're going with this.
She's a person that has cheated on her husband or her boyfriend. That's fine. That happens all the time in movies. She kills an innocent security guard. She ghosts the French 75 and rats them out, which leads to some of her comrades being killed and detained. And then she jets on her daughter. This is a reprehensible human being.
And I'm going to go a step further. When the letter's being read, the first thing that came to my mind is, this girl goes to Mexico. We see it. So now we see the distance between Willa and Bob and Perfidia. How did Bob ever get a letter from Perfidia? Who was the liaison? She's not going to just she doesn't know where they are. They don't know where she is, right?
Well, I mean, just as a matter of logistics, it's radio guy.
You think it's radio guy that gives the letter, or was that in the movie?
No. That's just a supposition on my part. No, not in the movie. Okay.
So that was just a little bit of a problem for me, that he had this letter from Perfidia to their daughter. I don't know how she got it. And then the sentimentality in that letter, it seemed like it was, I agree with you, let's just call it a soft ending. And the way that it seemed to warm Willa in that moment. I mean, obviously, if it was 5 years after she ran away and she has time to think about it and is going through all of this regret, she's going to want to have some sort of communication with that girl. How she's able to get it from point A to point B doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And the way that it landed. Now, I'm going to add something to this, Jason. And you said that was the first point. So you know what? Let me give you some runway here. What was the second problem?
No, I gave you both. So it's the letter from Perfidia to Willa that kind of makes you want to. Well, no, I guess I wrote it as two things, but I guess it's kind of the same thing. My first note was the letter from Perfidia to Willa, followed by the needle drop of American Girl as we go to the credits. But then I thought about it more, and it was like the whole thing about PTA wanting us to like Perfidia. So it's probably the same point.
Did it? Okay, and here's the second thing that was problematic for me. I thought we were going to go in the same direction. I found it awkward and somewhat soft landing, kind of tired, that they're on the police scanner in what looks like the same house that they had to run out of when Lockjaw found them and chased them down.
It's exactly the same house. Of course it is.
But this is problematic for me, that they're on the scanner and that she's like this revolutionary in training, and she's going to drive 4 hours off to join this protest movement. And it didn't land well with me, any of it, that somehow that she was carrying on some sort of revolutionary fervor that had been passed down through the family when we had so little background for how that family instilled in each one of the women this revolutionary fervor.
I think it's possible. She's just a 17-year-old going to a No Kings rally.
100. No, that's what I thought it was. But that it was made out to be like she's the next Perfidia, or that this is somehow going to this monumental task of, or monumental sacrifice of driving up to this protest. It seemed kind of a tepid way to end the movie. And I think so you and I were kind of on the same page. That was like, okay, instead of ending it with a bang, it kind of ends with a soft fart.
Well, and listen, I want to end it without having to root for PTA. Because, by the way, this movie has made $166 million globally. The WB, Warner Brothers, good for you. You awarded 2 auteurs with original stories, bucket loads of money, and they are making them back for you. Do it again. Sorry. Where did I start with that? I just went on my soapbox.
No, I was just commenting on how the movie, instead of ending with a loud bang, ended with a tepid fart. And
well, yeah, that's because you and I saw There Will Be Blood together. And we walked out of that movie. We didn't speak because we had just seen something important. And despite all the lofty ideals in this movie, I don't think that we saw something important.
That's a great point. That's an absolutely great point. And I guess that's why I was disappointed. Maybe because I was going in there with too high of an expectation based on the subject matter, right? This is an anti-fascism film. I'm expecting something of the same caliber. And like you said, it's much more a popcorn movie, and in many ways weaving between satire and farce. That's well put. That's well put, Jason.
I spent some time, sir.
Well, look, I appreciate you coming on the podcast to talk about the movie. I think we should do this more often. The problem being is when you and I text back and forth about why we don't, there are too few movies that I feel like are worth a damn that I'm going to go to the theater and then take this long to think about critically and make notes about. But hopefully there is going to be some more material out there that we can digest and then have another episode breaking down a new feature film.
We could also just go see, like pick a movie on a dartboard and go see a really shitty movie separate because we live in separate parts of the coast, and then convene to shit on it for 45 minutes.
Look, you name me any movie that's coming out now from fucking Marvel or DC, and most of these 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th movies now from some of these franchises. I heard things about Tron that it's basically every Tron movie is the same. Visually stimulating, stupid as fuck. So maybe that's the next one.
Well, they do have 9 Inch Nails.
That's true. Trent Reznor did the soundtrack. All right, buddy. I appreciate your time.
Hey, I had a blast. This was fun. This is, I think, kind of our first minor disagreement on one of the TV shows or movies that we talked about, and that was cool.
I don't think it'll be our last.
Likely not.
All right, buddy. Talk to you later.
Be well.
Act 2, Epilogue.
After editing the podcast and reflecting on some of the things that Jason had to say, some of the opinions he offered, I might need to go and see this movie again to evaluate my initial distaste. But I think Jason summed it up perfectly, that it is a series of masterclass vignettes in filmmaking. It is certainly not a masterclass in script writing. This is Why I Don't Vote, a podcast.